The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers for the third time, clanging against the concrete driveway like a death knell for my patience. I was under the hood of my ancient Volvo, a car that had more miles on it than a long-haul trucker and twice the attitude, when I heard Emily's voice drifting through our kitchen window. "No, he suspects nothing," she whispered, her tone carrying that silky quality she used to reserve for me. "I'll tell him I'm at Dad's. See you at the club." Club? I straightened up, wiping my hands on an oil-stained rag. Emily hadn't mentioned joining any club. Hell, the woman thought exercise was lifting her wine glass to her lips. Must be a real exclusive membership plan, I thought, my jaw tightening. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Samuel Carter, 42 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew my wife. We'd been married 8 years, long enough for the honeymoon phase to die a slow, painful death, but not long enough for me to expect this kind of betrayal. I'm a mechanical engineer at a manufacturing plant, the kind of guy who fixes things for a living. Ironic, considering I was about to discover something in my marriage that couldn't be repaired. Emily worked as an associate at Henderson, Mills & Associates, one of those downtown law firms where everyone wears suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She'd been putting in longer hours lately, coming home with stories about demanding clients and impossible deadlines. I'd been supportive, understanding. What a fool. The kitchen window was cracked open just enough for her voice to carry. I crept closer, my work boots silent on the damp grass. "I know it's risky," she continued, "but Sam's always buried in his work or at that disgusting gym. He won't notice if I'm gone a few extra hours." Disgusting gym? Red's boxing gym might not look like much. Peeling paint, cracked mirrors, and the perpetual smell of sweat and determination. But it was my sanctuary. The place where I could pound out my frustrations on heavy bags and pretend the world made sense. "Tomorrow night, then," Emily said, her voice dropping to a purr that made my stomach turn. "I can't wait to feel your hands on me again." I stood there in my own driveway, holding a wrench like it was a weapon, listening to my wife plan her next rendezvous with some mystery man. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days fixing broken machinery, but I couldn't fix my broken marriage because I hadn't even known it was broken. The call ended, and I heard Emily's heels clicking across our hardwood floors. I scrambled back to the car, shoving my head under the hood just as the front door opened. "How's the car coming along?" she asked, her voice bright and cheerful, the same voice that had just been making plans to cheat on me. "Oh, you know," I said, not looking up. "Same old problems. Things break down when you don't take care of them properly." She laughed, completely missing the double meaning. "Well, don't stay out here too long. It's getting cold." Cold. Yeah, that was one way to describe the chill running down my spine. "Actually," she continued, "I'll probably be late tomorrow night. Dad needs help with his taxes, and you know how he gets when he's confused about the paperwork." There it was. The lie, delivered with the casual ease of someone who'd been practicing. George, Emily's father, was a retired accountant who could do taxes in his sleep. The man had been preparing returns since before calculators were invented. He needed help with taxes like I needed help breathing. "That's nice of you," I managed, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Give George my regards." After she went inside, I stood in the driveway for another 20 minutes, staring at nothing and processing everything. The late nights, the new lingerie I'd found in her drawer, the way she'd started showering immediately after coming home from work. All the signs had been there, screaming at me like warning sirens, but I'd been too trusting or too stupid to listen. My phone buzzed. Red, my boxing coach, and the closest thing I had to a best friend. "You coming in tonight, Sammy? You look like hell lately. Trouble at home, or just bad whiskey?" Red had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things. He was pushing 70, built like a retired heavyweight, and had more wisdom in his pinky finger than most people had in their entire bodies. "Just car trouble," I texted back, which wasn't entirely a lie. My marriage was definitely experiencing some mechanical difficulties. That night, Emily made dinner, pasta with store-bought sauce, her idea of cooking, and chatted about her day at the firm. She mentioned a new junior partner named Nick Russo, whom everyone called Pumper because of his obsession with the gym. "He's kind of obnoxious," she said, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "Always flexing and talking about his workout routine. The other women in the office think he's attractive, but I find all that machismo tiresome." Right, tiresome. That's why she was planning to meet him tomorrow night. I nodded and made appropriate responses, playing the role of the oblivious husband while my mind raced. I was already formulating a plan, nothing dramatic, just a simple test to confirm what I already knew in my gut. The next evening, Emily kissed me goodbye with lips that felt like ice against my cheek. "Don't wait up," she said, grabbing her purse and keys. "You know how Dad gets when he's frustrated with numbers. This could take hours." "Take all the time you need," I replied, and I meant it. She was going to need every minute she could get because her time as my wife was about to expire. I waited exactly 30 minutes after she left, then drove across town to George's modest ranch house. The porch light was on, and I could see the blue glow of his television through the front window. I knocked, and George answered, wearing boxers, a bathrobe, and a confused expression. "Sam, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Hey, George, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Emily said she was here helping with taxes?" George's confusion deepened. "Taxes? Sam, I finished my taxes 3 weeks ago. Emily hasn't been here tonight." There it was, confirmation delivered by a 70-year-old man in his underwear. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest, like a shard of ice piercing my heart. "My mistake," I said, forcing a smile. "Must have misunderstood. Sorry to bother you." "You sure you're okay, son? You look a little pale." "Just tired. Long day at work." George studied my face with the intensity of a man who'd spent 40 years reading people's financial lies. "Sam, if there's something going on..." "Everything's fine, George. Really." But everything wasn't fine, and we both knew it. I drove home through streets that seemed darker than usual, past houses where other couples were probably settling in for quiet evenings together. Normal couples. Honest couples. Couples who didn't lie about tax preparation while planning their next affair. Back home, I sat in my kitchen and stared at Emily's coffee mug, still sitting in the sink from that morning. Such a small thing, but it represented everything that was wrong with our marriage. She couldn't even be bothered to clean up after herself, yet she expected me to believe her lies about helping her father. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Dad's really struggling tonight. Might be even later than I thought. Love you. Love." What a joke. I typed back, "Take your time. I'll be here." And I would be here, waiting, planning, and preparing for the conversation that would end everything. I spent the next morning at work in a haze of mechanical efficiency, going through the motions of inspecting machinery while my mind churned through possibilities. My coworkers noticed something was off. Jimmy Martinez asked if I was feeling sick, and even my supervisor, a man who typically showed all the emotional awareness of a brick wall, commented that I seemed distracted. "Personal stuff," I told them, which was true enough. It doesn't get more personal than discovering your wife is a cheating liar. During lunch break, I called George. "Hey, it's Sam. I was wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner tonight. Emily's been working so hard lately, and I thought it might be nice to have a family meal." George sounded pleased. "That's thoughtful of you, Sam. I'd love to. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself. How about 7 o'clock? "Perfect. I'll see you then." Phase 1 of my plan was in motion, Now I just had to prepare the stage for Emily's performance. I left work early and stopped at the grocery store, buying ingredients for Emily's favorite meal: grilled salmon, asparagus, and those expensive dinner rolls she liked from the bakery section. If I was going to destroy my marriage, I might as well do it with style. At home, I cleaned the house with the kind of attention to detail usually reserved for crime scenes. I vacuumed, dusted, and even lit the candles Emily had bought months ago but never used. I set the dining room table with our wedding china, the set her mother had insisted we register for, claiming we'd use it for special occasions. Well, this was definitely going to be special. I was arranging flowers in a vase when my phone rang. Red. "Sammy, you missed training yesterday, and you look like death warmed over. What's eating you?" Red had been coaching fighters for 30 years. He could read people like open books, and apparently I was a particularly depressing chapter. "Just some marriage stuff," I said, which was becoming my standard response to concerned inquiries. "Marriage stuff, huh? That usually means one of two things: money problems or cheating problems. You been gambling, Sam?" "No gambling." Red was quiet for a moment. "You want to talk about it?" "Not yet, but soon." "All right. But remember, when you're ready to hit something, I've got plenty of bags that need punishing." "Thanks, Red." After we hung up, I continued my preparations. I selected a bottle of wine from the rack Emily had insisted we install in the kitchen, a Pinot Grigio she'd bought on our last anniversary. The irony was perfect. At 6:30, I put the salmon in the oven and started the asparagus. The house smelled like a restaurant, warm and inviting. The kind of atmosphere that made people want to relax, let their guard down, maybe even tell the truth. George arrived promptly at 7, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a smile that made my chest tighten with guilt. He was a good man who was about to watch his daughter's marriage implode in real time. "This is wonderful, Sam," he said, looking around at the candlelit dining room. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion, just felt like doing something nice." We made small talk while I finished cooking. George told me about his volunteer work at the senior center, and I pretended to listen while watching the clock. Emily usually got home from her tax sessions around 8:30, which gave us plenty of time to get comfortable. At 8:15, I heard Emily's car in the driveway. George was in the middle of a story about teaching bridge to a group of retired teachers when the front door opened. "Sam, I'm home," Emily called out. "Dad was so frustrated with those forms, but I think we finally—" She appeared in the dining room doorway and froze. Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and then something that looked suspiciously like panic. "Dad? What are you doing here?" George looked up from his salmon, fork halfway to his mouth. "Sam invited me for dinner, said you'd been working so hard lately, he thought a family meal would be nice." Emily's eyes darted between her father and me. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how to maintain her lie in the face of contradictory evidence. That's so sweet," she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "I just didn't expect. I mean, after spending all evening with Dad, I thought he might want some time alone." George set down his fork. "All evening? Emily, what are you talking about? You haven't been at my house tonight." The silence that followed was the kind you hear right before a building collapses. Emily's face went pale, then flushed red. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. Her phone, which she'd been clutching in her hand, chose that moment to light up with a text message. From where I sat, I could see the name on the screen: Pumper. The message preview was visible for just a few seconds, but it was enough. "Miss you already. Can't wait for next time." I reached across the table and gently turned Emily's phone so George could see the screen. "Care to explain, darling?" I asked, my voice calm and conversational, as if I were asking her to pass the salt. Emily stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. That's not... He's just a coworker. A coworker who misses you already? George's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. Emily, where were you tonight? The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Emily looked at her father, then at me, then back at her father. I could see the exact moment she realized there was no way out, no clever lie that would explain away the evidence. I can explain, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Please do, I said, leaning back in my chair. We're all ears. Emily sank into the remaining chair like a deflated balloon. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the sound of her voice on the phone, the way she'd purred about feeling her lover's hands on her, and my sympathy evaporated like morning dew. It's not what you think, she began, which is what every cheater says when caught red-handed. George set down his wine glass with deliberate care. Emily, I raised you better than this. Don't insult our intelligence with lies. I wasn't lying about everything, she said desperately. I was at a coffee shop with Becca. We were talking about work stuff, and time just got away from us. Becca was Emily's best friend and coworker, a sharp-tongued woman who worked in HR at the law firm. I'd never particularly liked her. She had a way of looking at people like she was calculating their weaknesses, but Emily trusted her completely. Becca, huh? I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through Emily's text history, which I'd been monitoring for the past week. Funny thing about Becca. According to your messages, she's been out of town at a conference in Denver for the past 3 days. Emily's face went white. How did you... You've been reading my texts. When your wife starts lying about where she spends her evenings, you tend to get curious about her communications. I found what I was looking for and turned the phone toward George. Screenshots of conversations between Emily and Pumper, Nick Russo, the junior partner with the gym obsession and apparently flexible morals. The messages were explicit enough to make George flinch. Detailed plans for hotel meetings, complaints about having to lie to her clueless husband, and promises of physical acts that made my stomach turn. Jesus, Emily, George whispered. How long has this been going on? Emily buried her face in her hands. It's not serious. It doesn't mean anything. 3 months of hotel receipts suggest otherwise, I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared earlier. The Marriott downtown, every Tuesday and Thursday. Always the same room number, 314. Nick's got a standing reservation. I'd done my homework. Once I started looking, the evidence was everywhere. Credit card statements showing charges at restaurants I'd never been to, receipts for lingerie I'd never seen her wear, even a gym membership at the same upscale fitness center where Nick worked out. You joined his gym, I continued, my voice still conversational despite the rage burning in my chest. Platinum membership, $200 a month. That's interesting, considering you once told me that exercise was sweaty and pointless. George stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. He walked out to the back porch, leaving Emily and me alone at the table. The candles I'd lit earlier cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an almost romantic atmosphere that now felt obscene. Sam, please, Emily said, reaching across the table toward me. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. I moved my hands away from hers. 3 months isn't a mistake, Emily. It's a choice. Multiple choices, actually. Every lie, every hotel room, every time you came home and kissed me with his taste still on your lips. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Don't be disgusting. I'm not the one who made this disgusting. Emily straightened in her chair, and I saw a flash of the woman who'd climbed the ladder at her law firm, calculating, defensive, ready to fight. You want to know why? She said, her voice gaining strength. You really want to know why I went looking elsewhere? Enlighten me. Because you're boring, Sam. You come home from work, tinker with that stupid car, go to that disgusting gym, and fall asleep watching television? When's the last time you surprised me? When's the last time you made me feel desired? I made you dinner tonight, with candles. To trap me. This whole thing was a setup. The whole thing was necessary because you're a liar. Emily stood up, her chair tipping backward. Nick makes me feel alive. He's ambitious, exciting, successful. He's going places. He's going to bed with other men's wives. That's where he's going. At least he's passionate about something other than fixing broken machinery. The words hit their target. Emily knew exactly how to wound me, and she'd chosen her weapon well. My work wasn't glamorous. I fixed things that other people broke, solved problems that other people created. But it was honest work, and it mattered. You're right, I said quietly. I am boring. I'm the kind of boring guy who pays the mortgage on time, who remembers anniversaries, who doesn't cheat on his wife. Emily's anger deflated slightly. Sam, who apparently married a woman who thinks loyalty is boring and honesty is optional. George returned from the porch, his face grim. I'm ashamed of you, Emily. Your mother would be heartbroken. Emily's eyes filled with tears at the mention of her deceased mother. Don't bring Mom into this. Your mother raised you to have integrity, to honor your commitments. What you've done here. George shook his head. This isn't the daughter I raised. People make mistakes, Dad. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal. Of Sam, of your marriage, of everything you claimed to believe in. Emily looked between her father and me, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd lost. Not just her marriage, but her father's respect, her own integrity, and any claim to moral high ground. What happens now? She asked quietly. I stood up and began clearing the dinner plates. Now you get to explain to your lover that his secret is out. You get to figure out where you're going to live, because this house isn't big enough for both of us anymore. And you get to live with the consequences of your choices. Sam, please. Can't we try counseling? Can't we work through this? I paused in my plate clearing. Emily, you looked me in the eye every morning for 3 months and lied. You came home from being with another man and pretended to love me. You made me feel like I was losing my mind, questioning my own instincts about what was happening in my own marriage. I do love you. No, you don't. You love the security I provide. You love having someone to pay half the bills and maintain the house and be your reliable backup plan, but you don't love me. George put his hand on Emily's shoulder. Honey, you need to pack some things and come stay with me for a while. Give Sam some space to think. I don't need space to think, I said. I need a divorce attorney. The word divorce seemed to echo in the room like a gunshot. Emily began crying in earnest now, the kind of tears that come when reality finally breaks through denial. This is all wrong, she sobbed. This isn't how tonight was supposed to go. No, I agreed. Tonight was supposed to go like every other night for the past 3 months. You were supposed to lie, and I was supposed to believe you, and we were supposed to pretend our marriage wasn't a complete fraud. My phone buzzed with a text message. Read, Gym's open late tonight if you need to hit something. I showed the message to Emily. See? This is what real friends do. They offer support without expecting sex in return. Emily's sobs intensified, but I felt no satisfaction in her pain. This wasn't victory. It was just the end of something that had been dying for months without my knowledge. George helped his daughter gather some clothes and personal items while I sat in my kitchen, staring at the ruins of our dinner party. The salmon was getting cold, the candles were burning low, and my marriage was officially over. But as I sat there in the wreckage of my life, I realized something important. I wasn't broken. Hurt, angry, betrayed. Yes, but not broken. Emily had tried to make me feel like I was somehow responsible for her choices, like my boringness had driven her into another man's arms. But that was just another lie in a long chain of lies. I wasn't perfect, but I'd been faithful. I'd been honest. I'd been the man I'd promised to be when we got married. Emily, on the other hand, had promised to love, honor, and cherish me. She'd promised to forsake all others. She'd promised to be my partner through good times and bad. Promises, apparently, were just words to her, but to me they still meant something, and that difference between us was about to become very important. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in months without the weight of suspicion crushing my chest. Emily was gone, staying at George's house while she figured out her next move, and the house felt different. Quieter, but also cleaner somehow, like an infected wound that had finally been drained. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at Emily's empty chair and planning my next moves. The divorce would be straightforward enough. Illinois was a no-fault state, which meant Emily's adultery wouldn't affect the financial settlement, but it would certainly affect public opinion. And public opinion, I was beginning to realize, was going to be very important. My phone rang while I was getting ready for work. George. Sam, I want you to know how sorry I am about all this. Emily's actions, they don't represent the values I tried to teach her. I know that, George. This isn't your fault. Still, she's my daughter, and I feel responsible. Is there anything I can do? I thought about that. George was a respected member of the community, a man whose opinion carried weight. Actually, there is something. Don't cover for her. If people ask what happened, tell them the truth. You want me to tell people my daughter is an adulteress? I want you to tell people that my marriage ended because Emily chose to have an affair. I don't want her spinning this into a story about how we grew apart or had irreconcilable differences. She made a choice. Let her own it. George was quiet for a long moment. You're right. She needs to face the consequences of her actions. Thank you. At work, I tried to focus on my responsibilities, but word was already spreading. Small towns are like that. Secrets have a half-life of about 12 hours before everyone knows everyone else's business. By lunch, 3 different coworkers had approached me with variations of, I heard you and Emily are having some trouble. I gave them all the same response. Emily's been having an affair with a coworker. We're getting divorced. No sugarcoating, no euphemisms, no attempt to protect her reputation. Just the facts, delivered with the same straightforward honesty I brought to my engineering work. The reactions were predictable: shock, sympathy, and in a few cases, barely concealed satisfaction. Emily had never been particularly popular with my co-workers' wives. She had a way of making other women feel underdressed and unsophisticated at company parties. After work, I drove to Red's gym. I needed to hit something, and Red had the best heavy bags in town. The gym was busy for a Wednesday evening, a mix of serious boxers, fitness enthusiasts, and guys like me who just needed to work out their frustrations with their fists. Red spotted me the moment I walked in. There's my boy, he said, wrapping me in a bear hug that smelled like leather and liniment. You ready to tell me what's eating you? I told him everything while I wrapped my hands. Red listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disgust. So she's been playing house with some gym rat while you're at home playing the faithful husband, he summarized when I finished. And now she wants to blame you for being boring. That's about the size of it. Red shook his head. Women like that, they don't know what they've got until it's gone. But by then, it's too late. I'm not sure I'd want her back even if she begged. Good. A man's got to have some pride. Red held the heavy bag while I worked out 3 months' worth of anger and frustration. Each punch was a lie Emily had told, each combination a hotel room she'd paid for, each round a promise she'd broken. After an hour, I was exhausted, but clearer-headed than I'd been in weeks. Feel better? Red asked. Getting there. Good. Now, what are you going to do about this Nick character? I'd been thinking about that. Nick Russo, Pumper, was the other half of this equation. He'd known Emily was married, had pursued her anyway, and had apparently been bragging about his conquest to his gym buddies. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man he is. Red grinned. I like the sound of that. The next evening, I drove to the upscale fitness center where Nick worked out. It was one of those places that looked more like a spa than a gym, all chrome and mirrors and overpriced smoothies. The kind of place where people went to see and be seen rather than actually get in shape. I didn't have a membership, but the desk clerk was a young woman who looked sympathetic when I explained that I was looking for Nick Russo. "He's over there," she said, pointing toward the free weights section, the guy in the red tank top. Nick was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, muscular, with the kind of artificial tan that came from a bottle and the kind of confidence that came from never facing real consequences for his actions. He was bench pressing while chatting with two other men, probably regaling them with stories of his latest conquest. I walked over and waited until he finished his set. "Nick Russo?" He looked up, taking in my work clothes and less than impressive physique. "Yeah, that's me. Do I know you?" "I'm Sam Carter, Emily's husband." The change in his expression was immediate and satisfying. The cocky smile disappeared, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. "Oh, shit. Yeah, shit." His workout partners were watching with interest now. One of them, a guy with arms like tree trunks, stepped closer. "Everything okay here, Nick?" "Fine," Nick said quickly. Just a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, loud enough for everyone in the immediate area to hear. "Nick here has been sleeping with my wife for the past 3 months. I just wanted to come by and thank him for helping me realize what kind of woman I married." The gym had gone quiet around us. Nothing draws attention like the promise of drama, and I was about to give them a show. "Look, man," Nick said, standing up from the bench. "I didn't know you guys were having problems." "We weren't having problems until you started screwing my wife." "She said you guys were practically separated." "She lied. Emily's very good at lying. You probably know that by now." Nick's face was turning red. Whether from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. "This is between you and your wife, not me." "Really?" "Because my wife wasn't meeting herself at the Marriott every Tuesday and Thursday. She wasn't buying herself drinks at Murphy's Sports Bar. She wasn't sending herself explicit text messages." I pulled out my phone and started reading from Emily's message history. "I can't wait to feel your hands on me again. My boring husband has no idea what he's missing. You make me feel like a real woman." The crowd around us had grown. Several people were holding up their phones, recording the confrontation. In the age of social media, public humiliation had never been easier to distribute. "Dude, stop," Nick said, looking around nervously. "People are watching." "Good. They should know what kind of man you are, the kind who pursues married women and then acts surprised when their husbands show up." Nick's friend with the tree trunk arms stepped between us. "I think you should leave." "I'm not done talking." "Yeah, you are." The guy was bigger than me, younger than me, and probably in much better shape. But I'd spent the last 2 days having my life destroyed by people who thought they could push me around. I wasn't in the mood to back down. "Your friend Nick likes to take things that don't belong to him," I said, addressing the crowd rather than the bouncer. "Married women specifically. Just thought you should know the kind of person you're working out with." "Security!" someone called out. 2 uniformed guards appeared, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave." "No problem. I've said what I came to say." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Nick trying to explain himself to his friends. "She said they were getting divorced. I didn't know. This is crazy." But the damage was done. By tomorrow, everyone at his gym would know that Nick Russo was the kind of man who slept with other people's wives. His reputation as a smooth operator would be replaced by his reputation as a homewrecker. It was a small victory, but it felt good. Outside in the parking lot, I spotted Nick's car, a red Corvette with vanity plates that read, "Pump 1. Subtle." I walked over and examined it, noting the pristine paint job and custom wheels. The car probably cost more than I made in a year. I didn't key it. I didn't slash the tires. I didn't do anything that could be considered vandalism. Instead, I did something much more creative. I had a box of condoms in my glove compartment, left over from the early days of my marriage when Emily and I still had sex regularly. I scattered them across Nick's windshield and hood, then tucked one under each windshield wiper. Then I took out a piece of paper and wrote a note. "Thanks for the memories. Hope it was worth your reputation. Emily's boring husband." I tucked the note under the central condom and stepped back to admire my work. It wasn't destruction of property, it was artistic expression. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: satisfaction. Not happiness, exactly, but the deep contentment that comes from taking action instead of just absorbing punishment. Emily had humiliated me in private for 3 months. Now it was time for some public humiliation in return, and I was just getting started. The fallout from my gym confrontation spread through town like wildfire. By Friday morning, everyone knew about Emily's affair, Nick's role in it, and my very public response. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts from friends, coworkers, and even people I barely knew, all offering support or asking for details. The most interesting call came from Becca, Emily's best friend. "Sam, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "Can you meet me for coffee?" Becca had always been an enigma to me. She was attractive in a sharp, predatory way, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of ambition that made other people nervous. Emily trusted her completely, but I'd always sensed something calculating beneath her friendly exterior. "What about?" I asked. "About Emily. About what really happened. There are things you don't know." We met at a coffee shop downtown, far enough from our neighborhood to avoid the local gossip network. Becca was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall like she was expecting trouble. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure you would. Emily's affair is hardly a secret anymore. What could you possibly tell me that I don't already know?" Becca stirred her latte thoughtfully. "How about the fact that I'm the one who introduced her to Nick?" That was unexpected. "Why would you do that?" "Because Emily asked me to. She said she was bored in her marriage and wanted to meet someone exciting, someone who could make her feel alive again." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "She asked you to help her find someone to cheat with?" "Not in so many words, but yes, essentially." "And you thought that was okay?" Becca shrugged. "Emily's a grown woman. She can make her own choices. What about me? What about our marriage? What about it? Sam, be honest. When's the last time you and Emily were really happy together?" I thought about that. The truth was, we'd been growing apart for over a year. The conversations had become shorter, the silences longer. We'd stopped making love regularly, stopped planning for the future together, stopped being partners and become more like roommates. But none of that justified adultery. "Being unhappy doesn't give someone the right to cheat," I said. "No, but it explains why they do." Becca leaned forward, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something expensive and subtle. "Sam, can I tell you something? Emily's not the only one who's been unhappy." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've watched you for 8 years trying to make Emily happy, trying to be the perfect husband and getting nothing in return. You deserve better." There was something in her tone that made me look at her more carefully. "Becca, what are you really trying to say?" She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "I'm saying that maybe this affair is the best thing that could have happened to you. Maybe it's time you found someone who actually appreciates what you have to offer." Her hand was warm, her touch deliberate. I understood now why she'd wanted to meet. "You're hitting on me," I said. "My wife's best friend is hitting on me." "Ex-wife soon. And yes, I am." I pulled my hand away. "Jesus, Becca. Emily's affair isn't even cold yet, and you're already moving in?" "I've been interested in you for years, Sam. I just never acted on it because you were married. But now that you're not, I'm still married. The divorce papers haven't even been filed yet. Details. I stood up, suddenly feeling like I needed a shower. This is exactly the kind of thinking that got Emily into trouble. Marriage isn't just a piece of paper. It's a commitment. Even if Emily doesn't understand that, I do. Becca's expression hardened. Don't be so self-righteous, Sam. You're not a saint. I never claimed to be, but I'm also not the kind of person who hits on my friends' spouses. Your friend? Emily stopped being your friend the moment she started sleeping with Nick. That doesn't make what you're doing right. Becca gathered her purse and stood up. Fine, but when you get lonely in that big, empty house, remember that I offered. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of a week, I'd discovered that my wife was an adulteress, her best friend was a predator, and apparently, everyone around me had been keeping secrets. It made me wonder who else in my life wasn't what they seemed. That afternoon, I went to see a divorce attorney. Margaret Walsh was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in dissolving marriages with maximum efficiency and minimum drama. Adultery cases are always messy, she told me after I'd explained the situation. But you've got good documentation. The text messages, hotel receipts, witness testimony from your father-in-law, it all helps establish a pattern of deception. What about the financial settlement? Illinois is a no-fault state, so the adultery won't directly affect property division, but it might influence spousal support, especially if we can show that Emily's affair caused you emotional distress. It did. Good. We'll document that. Have you been seeing a therapist? No, but I've been hitting the heavy bag at my gym pretty regularly. Margaret smiled. That's not quite the same thing, but we'll work with it. She walked me through the divorce process, explaining timelines and procedures with the kind of clinical detachment that comes from handling hundreds of failed marriages. One more thing, she said as I was leaving. Don't do anything stupid. No confronting the boyfriend, no public scenes, no social media rants. The last thing we want is for Emily's attorney to paint you as the unstable, vindictive husband. Too late for that advice, but I didn't tell her about my gym performance. That evening, Emily called. Sam, we need to talk. Talk to my attorney. Please, just 5 minutes. I'm coming over. She arrived 20 minutes later, looking smaller somehow than she had a week ago. The confident, put-together lawyer had been replaced by a woman who looked like she hadn't been sleeping well. The whole town is talking about us, she said, sitting on the edge of our couch like she was afraid to get comfortable. You mean they're talking about your affair? About both of us, about what you did at Nick's gym. What I did was tell the truth. Emily rubbed her temples. Sam, this has gotten out of hand. People at work are staring at me. My boss called me into his office for a conversation about maintaining professional standards. Sleeping with a coworker probably violates those standards. Nick might get fired. Good. Emily looked up at me with something that might have been desperation. Sam, please, can't we handle this privately, like adults? You mean the way you handled our marriage? With lies and hotel rooms and secret phone calls? I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But destroying Nick's career isn't going to fix our marriage. Our marriage is over, Emily. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. The words hung in the air between us. Emily started crying, not the dramatic sobs from dinner with her father, but quiet tears that seemed to come from some deep well of regret. I never meant for it to go this far, she said. It started as just excitement, something different. I thought I could keep it separate from us. There is no us anymore. There could be, if you wanted. We could try counseling, work through this. Emily, stop. Just stop. I sat down across from her, maintaining distance but trying to be gentle. Despite everything, this woman had been my partner for 8 years. We'd had good times together, made plans, shared dreams. The end of all that deserved some dignity. You didn't just cheat on me. I said quietly. You lied to me every day for 3 months. You made me feel crazy for suspecting what was happening. You came home from being with another man and pretended to love me. I do love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of me, the security, the stability, the backup plan. But you don't love me enough to be faithful. You don't love me enough to be honest. And you sure as hell don't love me enough to put our marriage ahead of your excitement. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. So that's it? 8 years, and you're just throwing it all away? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. She stood up, and for a moment, I thought she was going to leave. Instead, she moved closer, sitting on the arm of my chair. Sam, please, one more chance. I'll end it with Nick. I'll do whatever you want. You'll end it with Nick, because his reputation is ruined and your boss is asking questions. Not because you suddenly developed a conscience. Emily put her hand on my shoulder. I made a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake, but people can change. People can change, I agreed. But they have to want to change for the right reasons. You want to change because you got caught, not because you realized what you were doing was wrong. I stood up, gently removing her hand. I want you to move out, permanently. Take whatever you need, leave the rest. We'll sort out the details through our attorneys. Emily stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You're really going to do this? I'm really going to do this. Fine. Her sadness was already transforming back into anger. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. You want a divorce? You'll get one. But I'm not going to just roll over and let you take everything. I don't want everything, Emily. I just want my life back. After she left, I walked through the house, looking at the remnants of our shared life. Wedding photos on the mantel, furniture we'd picked out together, books with both our names written inside the covers. It should have been sadder than it was. But mostly, I felt relieved. The lies were over. The pretending was over. The marriage was over. Now I could start figuring out what came next. 2 weeks later, I was settling into my new routine as a separated man when everything exploded again. It started with a phone call from Red at 6 in the morning. Sammy, you need to get down here, now. What's wrong? Just get down here, and bring a camera. I threw on clothes and drove to the gym, my mind racing through possibilities. When I arrived, I found Red standing in the parking lot with his arms crossed, staring at my car. Someone had keyed it. Deep scratches ran along both sides, spelling out asshole in letters 2 feet tall. All 4 tires had been slashed, and my windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks. Security cameras caught it, Red said, handing me his phone. You're gonna love this. The video was grainy but clear enough. Nick Russo creeping around my car at 3 in the morning with a key in one hand and a tire iron in the other. His face was clearly visible under the parking lot lights. Stupid bastard looked right at the camera, Red said with satisfaction, like he wanted to get caught. I called the police, and Detective O'Hara arrived 20 minutes later. She was a compact woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that comes from dealing with idiots all day long. Domestic situation? She asked after examining the damage. My wife's boyfriend, I explained. We had a public confrontation a couple weeks ago, and apparently he didn't appreciate it. Detective O'Hara watched the security footage twice, taking notes. This is pretty clear-cut vandalism. We'll pick him up this morning. What kind of charges? Criminal damage to property, probably a Class A misdemeanor. He's looking at up to a year in jail and a $10,000 fine. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Nick had just escalated this from a personal dispute to a criminal matter. There's one more thing, I said, showing her my phone. He's been sending me threatening text messages. The messages had started 3 days ago, escalating from angry to menacing. You ruined my life. This isn't over. You're going to pay for what you did. Detective O'Hara read through them with growing interest. Harassment, intimidation, maybe even stalking depending on what else he's been up to. This guy's having a really bad week. Nick was arrested at his apartment 2 hours later. The local news picked up the story by afternoon. Local attorney's affair leads to vandalism arrest. And suddenly my private humiliation became very public entertainment. Emily called that evening, furious. "Are you happy now?" she demanded. "Nick's been fired. His picture is all over the news. You've destroyed his entire life." Nick destroyed his own life when he decided to sleep with married women and then commit crimes when he got caught. He was just angry. People do stupid things when they're angry. Yeah, they do. Like having affairs with their coworkers. This is all your fault. If you hadn't made that scene at his gym, Emily, stop. Just stop defending him. The man vandalized my car and sent me threatening messages. He's not a victim here. But Emily wasn't listening to reason. She'd chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. The next morning brought another surprise. Becca showed up at my house with coffee and pastries, playing the role of supportive friend. "I heard about Nick," she said, settling into my kitchen like she belonged there. "What a psycho." "Yeah, well, criminals tend to be a little unstable." Emily must be devastated. She really thought she loved him. I studied Becca's face, looking for some hint of her real agenda. "You don't seem too broken up about your friend's heartbreak." Emily made her choice. Now she has to live with the consequences. Becca moved closer, invading my personal space with practiced ease. "The question is, what are you going to do now? File for divorce, move on with my life? You could do more than that." "Such as?" Becca smiled, and there was something predatory in her expression. "Emily's not the only one with secrets, Sam. There are things about her that you don't know, things that could make your divorce very interesting." "What kind of things?" "The kind that could cost her a lot more than half your assets." I leaned back, putting distance between us. "Becca, what are you really after here? I told you, I've been interested in you for years. Now that Emily's out of the picture..." "Emily's not out of the picture. We're separated, not divorced. Details. Important details." Becca's smile faded. "You're really going to make me spell this out, aren't you?" "Spell what out?" "Emily didn't just have an affair with Nick. She's been skimming money from the firm's client accounts. Small amounts, nothing that would be noticed immediately, but it adds up." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "You're lying." "I work in HR, Sam. I see everything that goes through the system. Emily's been very clever about it, but not clever enough." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want Emily gone, permanently, and I want you." The truth hit me like a physical blow. "You set this whole thing up." Becca's smile returned. I introduced Emily to Nick, knowing exactly what would happen. Emily's always been weak when it comes to attractive men. I knew she wouldn't be able to resist. "You destroyed my marriage to get to me? I saved you from a marriage to a woman who was already stealing from her clients. Emily would have been caught eventually. This way, you get out clean." I stood up so fast my chair fell over. "Get out. Sam, listen to me. Get out of my house, now." Becca gathered her things slowly, like she was giving me time to change my mind. "You're making a mistake. Emily's going to drag you down with her when this comes out." "That's my problem." "It doesn't have to be. Help me expose her, and you can walk away from this with everything." I said get out. After Becca left, I sat in my kitchen trying to process what I'd learned. My wife was a cheater and possibly a thief. Her best friend was a manipulative sociopath who'd orchestrated the destruction of my marriage. And I was apparently the only person in this whole mess who still believed in basic human decency. My phone rang. Detective O'Hara. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk. Can you come down to the station?" "What about?" "Nick Russo made some interesting claims during his interview. About you, your wife, and some missing money." The pieces were falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. At the police station, Detective O'Hara led me to a small interview room that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. "Nick's claiming that you knew about your wife's affair for months," she said without preamble. "He says you were blackmailing them, demanding money to keep quiet. That's insane. He's also claiming that Emily's been embezzling from her law firm and that you were in on it. Also insane." Detective O'Hara leaned back in her chair. "Here's the thing, Mr. Carter. Nick's story doesn't make much sense, but when we contacted Emily's law firm to verify his claims, they got very interested very quickly." Meaning they're conducting an internal audit right now, and if they find evidence of embezzlement, this whole situation gets a lot more complicated. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. "Detective, I swear to you, I had no idea Emily was stealing money. I found out about the affair 2 weeks ago, and I've never asked anyone for money to keep quiet about anything." "I believe you. But the law firm doesn't know you, and they're going to want answers." "What kind of answers?" "The kind that explain how a woman making 6 figures a year was able to afford hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and luxury gym memberships on top of her regular expenses." I thought about that. Emily's salary was good, but not great. We'd always lived within our means, splitting expenses down the middle. If she'd been funding her affair with stolen money. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "Preliminary numbers suggest around $50,000 over the past year." $50,000. Enough to fund a lot of hotel rooms and expensive dinners. Enough to ruin a career and possibly result in criminal charges. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you get a lawyer. A good one. Because even if you're innocent, you're married to someone who might be facing embezzlement charges." I left the police station feeling like I was trapped in someone else's nightmare. In the span of 2 weeks, I'd gone from suspicious husband to divorce plaintiff to potential accessory to embezzlement. And the worst part was, I still didn't know how deep this rabbit hole went. That evening, Emily showed up at my door again. But this time, she wasn't crying or angry. She looked terrified. "Sam, we need to talk. Really talk." "About your theft from the law firm?" Emily's face went white. "How did you—" "The police told me. Apparently your boyfriend decided to throw you under the bus to save himself. It's not what you think. It never is with you, Emily." She pushed past me into the house, pacing like a caged animal. "I didn't steal anything. Not exactly." "Explain not exactly." "I borrowed money from client accounts. Short-term loans. I always paid it back." "With what money?" "My salary, bonuses, whatever I could scrape together." I stared at her, trying to understand the logic. "Emily, that's still theft. You can't just borrow money from client accounts without permission." I was desperate. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain a relationship like that? The hotels, the dinners, the clothes? So you stole money to fund your affair." "I borrowed money to try to feel alive for the first time in years." Emily's voice broke on the last word, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine despair. Not regret over getting caught, but actual understanding of what she'd done. "Emily, you need a lawyer, a criminal defense attorney. I need your help." "My help?" "The firm thinks you might have known about the money. If you tell them you had no idea, that I kept everything secret from you. I did have no idea, and you did keep it secret. Then tell them that, please. If they think we were in this together, we'll both go down." I looked at my wife, soon to be ex-wife, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. She'd made a series of increasingly bad decisions, each one designed to dig herself deeper into a hole she couldn't climb out of. "I'll tell them the truth," I said. "That's all I can do." "Thank you. But Emily, after this is over, I never want to see you again. Whatever we had, whatever we meant to each other, it's gone. You killed it with your lies and your theft and your complete disregard for anyone but yourself. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I know I ruined everything. Yes, you did. After she left, I called Margaret Walsh, my divorce attorney, and explained the situation. She listened without comment, then sighed heavily. This complicates things, she said. If Emily's facing criminal charges, we might want to delay the divorce proceedings until that's resolved. Why? Because if she goes to prison, it affects everything. Asset division, spousal support, even your own legal exposure. I didn't do anything wrong. I know, but being married to someone who's charged with embezzlement can still cause problems. I hung up feeling more exhausted than I had since this whole nightmare began. I'd started out as the victim of adultery, and now I was potentially the spouse of a felon. But as I sat in my quiet house, thinking about everything that had happened, I realized something important. I was still the same person I'd always been. Honest, hard-working, faithful to my commitments. Emily had made her choices, Becca had made hers, Nick had made his. Now it was time for me to make mine, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of waiting for the legal system to sort out Emily's mess, I was going to take control of the narrative myself. I called Detective O'Hara first. I want to make a formal statement, I told her, about everything I know regarding Emily's activities. You don't have to do that without a lawyer present. I want to. I've got nothing to hide, and I'm tired of being treated like a suspect in my wife's crimes. We scheduled the interview for that afternoon. Then I called Margaret Walsh and told her what I was planning. Sam, I strongly advise against this. Anything you say could potentially be used against you later. Margaret, I've been honest about everything from the beginning. I'm not going to start hiding behind lawyers now. At least let me be present during the interview. Fine, but I'm telling them everything I know. The interview took 3 hours. Detective O'Hara, Margaret, and a prosecutor from the district attorney's office listened while I laid out the timeline of my marriage's collapse. I showed them Emily's text messages, the hotel receipts I'd found, the credit card statements that documented her affair. More importantly, I showed them my own financial records, bank statements, pay stubs, tax returns, proving that I'd had no access to the law firm's money and no knowledge of Emily's theft. Mr. Carter, the prosecutor said when I finished, you understand that your wife could be facing serious felony charges. I understand that my wife made choices that have consequences. I also understand that I'm not responsible for those choices. You're not angry? Not looking for revenge? I thought about that. I was angry. I am angry. But I'm not looking to destroy Emily's life. She's doing a fine job of that herself. I just want to move on with mine. After the interview, Detective O'Hara walked me to my car. For what it's worth, she said, I believe you. You're either completely innocent or the best liar I've ever met. I'm completely innocent. I know. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I went to Murphy's sports bar, the same place where Emily and Nick had conducted their affair. I wasn't looking for trouble or closure or any kind of dramatic confrontation. I just wanted a beer and some normalcy. The bartender, a guy named Tommy whom I'd known for years, spotted me immediately. Sam, Jesus, man, I heard about everything. I'm sorry. Thanks, Tommy. For what it's worth, I never liked that guy she was with. Cocky bastard, always showing off. Tommy poured me a beer and waved away my money. This one's on the house. Hell, the next 10 are on the house. I was halfway through my beer when someone sat down next to me. George, Emily's father. Mind if I join you? Course not. George ordered a whiskey and sat quietly for a few minutes. Finally, he spoke. I raised her better than this, Sam. I don't know where I went wrong. You didn't go wrong, George. Emily made her own choices. She called me today, crying, begging me to help her find a criminal defense attorney. George shook his head. My daughter, the thief. I'm sorry. Don't be. You tried to be a good husband. Emily she wanted more than what she had. More excitement, more money, more everything. Some people are never satisfied. We drank in comfortable silence for a while, two men mourning the death of relationships that had meant everything to us. What will you do now? George asked. Start over, I guess. Finish the divorce, sell the house, figure out what comes next. You're a good man, Sam. You'll find someone who appreciates that. Maybe. Right now I'm just focused on getting through this. George finished his whiskey and stood up. For what it's worth, I'm glad Emily married you. Even if it didn't work out, you gave her 8 good years. That's more than she deserved. After George left, I sat at the bar for another hour, thinking about the past few weeks. A month ago, I'd been a married man with a stable life and a predictable future. Now I was separated, potentially divorced, and caught up in a criminal investigation. But strangely, I felt better than I had in years. The lies were over. The pretending was over. The constant feeling that something was wrong in my marriage, that was over too. I was free. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Be Becca. Still playing games, still trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. I deleted the message without responding. Becca could scheme and plot all she wanted. I was done being anyone's pawn. The next morning brought news that surprised no one who'd been paying attention. Emily had been formally charged with embezzlement, theft, and fraud. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page, complete with her law school graduation photo and details about the investigation. My phone rang constantly. Reporters, curious neighbors, Emily's coworkers wanting to know if I'd known about the theft. I gave them all the same response. No comment. The only call I took was from Red. How you holding up, champ? Better than expected. Good. You ready to get back to training? You've got some aggression to work out. Yeah, I think I am. That afternoon, I went to the gym for the first time since everything exploded. The other fighters treated me like a returning hero, backslaps, handshakes, and more free advice than I knew what to do with. You're better off without her, said Jimmy, a welterweight who'd been training there longer than anyone. Woman who'll cheat will steal, and woman who'll steal will do anything. Red wrapped my hands and held the heavy bag while I worked out months of frustration. Each punch felt like shedding another layer of the person I'd been, the trusting husband, the naive fool, the man who'd believed his wife's lies. Feel better? Red asked after I'd gone 10 rounds. Getting there. Good. Now, what are you going to do about that Becca woman? I'd told Red about Becca's visits, her confessions, her attempts to seduce me while my marriage was falling apart. Nothing. She's not my problem. She made herself your problem when she set this whole thing in motion. Maybe. But I'm not going to lower myself to her level. Red nodded approvingly. That's the difference between you and them, Sammy. You've got class. That evening, I made another decision. I called the managing partner at Emily's law firm and asked for a meeting. Mr. Carter, I'm not sure that's appropriate, he said. Given the ongoing investigation, I have information that might be relevant to your case, information about how this situation developed. What kind of information? The kind that explains how my wife got involved with Nick Russo in the first place. We met the next morning in his downtown office, a space that looked like it had been designed to intimidate people into paying large legal fees. The managing partner, a silver-haired man named Harrison, listened while I told him about Becca's role in introducing Emily to Nick, her admission that she'd orchestrated the affair, and her apparent knowledge of Emily's financial crimes. Ms. Rebecca Martinez has been with our firm for 6 years, Harrison said when I finished. She's been above reproach. Has she? Or has she just been careful? Harrison made some notes. We'll look into this. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. There's one more thing. Becca approached me after Emily's affair became public. She tried to seduce me, and when I rejected her, she threatened to make things worse for Emily unless I cooperated. Cooperated how? She wanted me to help her expose Emily's theft. She claimed she wanted Emily gone permanently so she could have me. Harrison's expression darkened. That's a very serious allegation. It's also true, and I'm willing to testify to that effect if necessary. I left the meeting feeling like I'd finally taken control of the situation. For weeks, I'd been reacting to other people's schemes and lies. Now I was taking action. That afternoon, Detective O'Hara called. "Interesting development in your case," she said. "We executed a search warrant on Rebecca Martinez's home and office this morning. Find anything?" "Copies of client files, financial records, and a very detailed journal documenting her plan to break up your marriage and frame Emily for embezzlement." "Frame her? Emily actually stole the money." "Yes, but according to Becca's journal, she was planning to make it look like Emily stole much more than she actually did. She'd been manipulating financial records to inflate the amount and implicate you as an accomplice." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She was going to frame me too? Looks that way. The plan was to destroy both you and Emily, then position herself as the whistleblower who exposed the crime. She would have come out looking like a hero while you both went to prison. Jesus. The good news is, we now have evidence that Emily's theft was limited to about $15,000, not the $50,000 we originally thought. She's still facing charges, but they'll be significantly reduced. And Becca? Conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and a few other charges we're still working on. She's looking at more prison time than your wife. After Detective O'Hara hung up, I sat in my kitchen, trying to process everything I'd learned. Becca hadn't just introduced Emily to Nick. She'd orchestrated an elaborate scheme to destroy both our lives. Emily's affair hadn't been a moment of weakness or boredom. It had been part of someone else's revenge plot. I felt sorry for Emily, which surprised me. She'd still made the choice to cheat, still stolen money from her clients, still lied to me for months. But she'd also been manipulated by someone she trusted, someone who'd pretended to be her friend while planning her destruction. My phone rang. Emily. "Sam, I just heard about Becca. I can't believe... I trusted her. She was my best friend." "I know. She set me up. She introduced me to Nick, encouraged me to have the affair, even helped me figure out how to hide it from you. I know that too. Sam, I'm so sorry. For everything. The affair, the lying, the money. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. Emily, you made choices, bad choices. The fact that Becca manipulated you doesn't change that. I know, but it explains some things, doesn't it? Why I was so reckless, why I kept making worse and worse decisions." I thought about that. Maybe. But you still made those decisions. Yes, I did. And I'll have to live with the consequences. Yes, you will. Sam, can I ask you something? What? Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I considered the question carefully. I don't know, Emily. Right now, I'm just trying to move forward. I understand. And Sam? Thank you. For what? For being the kind of man who tells the truth, even when it would be easier to lie. For protecting me, even after everything I did to hurt you. After she hung up, I realized something important. I did forgive Emily. Not because what she'd done was okay, but because holding on to anger was only hurting me. Emily had made her choices. Becca had made hers. Nick had made his. Now it was time for me to make mine, and I chose to move forward. 3 months later, I stood in a courtroom and watched my marriage officially end. Emily pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received 2 years probation and community service. Becca was sentenced to 18 months in prison for conspiracy and fraud. Nick had already moved to another state, his legal career effectively over. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Red. "Training tonight? I've got a new heavy bag that needs breaking in." I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. I was ready to start the next chapter of my life.